In this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about the camera's ability to create depth of field. So if you take a look at this image here, we've got this 3D environment. So notice that all these objects here are three-dimensional. Otherwise, these cameras would not allow this to happen. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to double-click this camera, and notice that there is a feature here that says Enable Depth of Field. And you have to enable it because you don't always want this if you're having a camera move around. And so let's say you wanted to create the illusion of a rack focus, for example. You turn that on and notice immediately what's going on here is the guy in the front is in the foreground. So let's take a look at how this is set up. Let's go to two views, and let's actually change this to horizontal. All right, so you can see the camera and what it's doing here. And let's hit UU to show us the things that have animation going on in the camera. And so you'll notice that the focal distance is what is animating here. So what we want to do is take a look at look over here at this camera, and as I move the playhead, notice what's animating is the focal distance. Okay, and so that is what is creating this rack focus. So if we double click this, and you can see here that the focal distance is altering, and the focal length is going to be impacted. As it changes over time, it gives this illusion of depth of field and a rack focus. So that is something that I feel is pretty useful. And then we also have a good example of another depth of field would be over here where you've got, let's go ahead and look at this also in two views horizontal. And let's look at this one from the top so we can see where the camera is and what it's doing. So if I go ahead and twirl down the camera and I can animate, here's the aperture, it is actually changing. So you can kind of see what's going on here. So the aperture is actually what's changing. So you're not going to see anything change in this camera here because last time we had the focal distance is what was animating. Here we're actually changing the aperture. Okay, so if you double click the camera, you'll see that the aperture has a setting, but in order to animate it, you have to come into here and change the aperture settings any way you want to. So as you change these pixels, is going to impact what's going on in the frame. So you can see that this thing in the foreground is being impacted as we close down this iris or aperture. Okay. I also kind of wanted to revisit the camera motion. If you recall, we did the rig built in here. So notice the camera here in this window is on this path and it's going around this object. Okay, so this is a very smooth motion. So if you look at the path that the camera takes, the point of interest does not change, just the camera does. And so as that changes, if I hit letter UU, so you can see what's going on with the position here, that's the only thing animating is the position, not the point of interest. And so that allows the camera to go around. But if we were going to actually use the null orbit solution that I showed you last time, so now the camera is not moving, but the null is moving. And so this is a good visualization. If you're looking, let me go ahead and say two views. And let's take this one from the top. And select the camera so we can kind of see what's going on. Actually, we're going to select the camera. And as it moves, so now the null is what is moving, and the camera is just parented to it. And so by doing that, we can also move it back in time, in space, I mean. So the position, the camera is just going back. Notice that the position is, if you looked at just the camera, if I turn off the parenting and you want to see what the camera is doing, all the camera is doing is going back and forth. Okay? And now if I turn that back on, so the null is spinning in space and the camera's going back. So I was asked, why is this a good thing? Well, I've simplified this because now I'm not trying to get the camera to not only move back and forth and to pan left and right, because you'll find that that makes it kind of difficult. This way, it simplifies the process, and this rig will make it a little bit smoother. So I hope that kind of clears up that question that was addressed.